All right, welcome back. We are Game 2014 in the fall 2020 semester. So that's Mobile Game Development 1 at George Brown, and it's week 13, part 1 of our broadcast. I want to talk about a schedule really quickly. We're sitting at week 13. Today we're doing some special effects, some particle effects and camera work, as well as some gameplay improvements. Next week we've got a special topics week, and your assignment 2, part 2 is officially due. We'll see how this goes. And I mean that in the nicest way. I mean, we'll see if we're going to be able to pull this off. A lot of people have a lot of stuff going on next week. We may have to extend this date just a little bit. Not the whole week, but just a little bit. We'll see how it goes. And then we're into our practical test. Just a reminder that on week 15, there is no formal lab, lecture that is kind of waiting for us to happen. Right, it's going to be just office hours and me basically, giving you feedback and giving you help with your test, which will be based on some of the stuff that we've been talking about so far. Chances are it'll be based off of a starter, similar to what we do with our labs. So if you've been following along every week, then you'll get a lab starter, and I'll ask you to do something, whatever that is. All right, so today, what are we doing this week? I am going to do a bit of a Unity demo. Just give us a test. What do you mean a test, Kat? Do you want like a true, false, multiple choice test again? Yeah, no, it can't be like that. We have to make it more practical. I've already given you 2, and people are, it was bad enough. So let's, and even with the by the way, even with those little tests, I can't believe that not everyone got perfect in the last one. So that is very surprising. But anyways, people do things the way we want to do it. People even miss the test too. All right, so we're going to do this. We're going to start with some gameplay improvements, and we're going to use Cinemachine as opposed to using the standard assets. And we're also going to make a retro dust trail particle system, as well as some camera shake and sounds. If we have time today, and I didn't have time in the first session, is to do a mini map so we can see the level in its entirety, which means maybe more level. All right. Yeah, I know. Sometimes, Michael, it is, but a lot of the tests came right from the PowerPoints. So if you carefully read the PowerPoints, you should have got close to perfect. But anyways, let's continue. So there's the starter. I'm going to just make a copy of my starter, which is down in here. Let's start with the starter. Again, the test is not made to, by any means, confuse you or anything like that. So I apologize if that was something that you saw. It was more like I wanted you guys to go through the material and, spend your time doing some of that. So it shouldn't have been so bad. Most people did very well. I'm not going to tell you that, that people suffered or anything like that. So while I'm doing this, if you can please download the starter package, and then we'll go from there. I'm going to start off Lab 10B, and we'll go for a few hours, and then we'll stop. But I'm going to probably take a break up some portion of the way through to give us all a chance to take a breather, washing break, grab a snack, maybe a coffee, and then continue. All right. So yeah, okay. So one thing to note for this one, for this starter, just to notice, I have removed the standard assets from Lab 10, and I talked about this before that we need to trim. So I've been, one of the things I'm trimming out is the standard assets. The only real thing that I used there so far was the camera. So we're going to replace the camera, follow script with Cinemachine, which actually works really awesome. And we're going to use Cinemachine for camera shake as well. So let's do this. We'll just replace this with, instead of Lab 10, we'll call it Lab 10B. And I'm just going to get rid of my Git repository here, because this is from this piece, and I'm just going to pull up command prompt and then pull this down in here. And we're just going to drag and drop CD. I'm not going to use a tool today. And git init, git add dot, git commit -m, and we'll say initial commit, just like normal. These are all regular things. I'm going to pull up GitHub here. So we're going to go into George Brown College. I'm going to click new and public. We'll call this Game 2014, the fall 2020 semester, and Lab 10B. And if everything goes well, you'll have this. Grab these last 3 lines of code, go back to the command prompt, paste, and press enter and push. And that should do everything you need to put everything up on GitHub for your Lab 10B. That's a good place to start. Excellent. Okay, I'm going to bring up my Unity Hub now, and I'm going to add my project. So I know I've added 10B. Here it is. Select folder and start it. And one day, it's going to do what it's going to do. So here's my project. Now what you need to do is you need to go into build settings, make sure you switch to Android platform. I've already done this on my end. Okay, so switch to Android, make sure you configure in the player settings, make sure you configure this to say Lab 10B as opposed to just Lab 10. And then see if you can detect your device. I detect my emulator, which is I'm using LD Player. Funny enough, LD Player has a really weird glitch when I drag it between monitors. Not sure why that is, but it's the first time I've ever seen a problem with LD Player in any way. Right? So it's weird. I don't know why it's happening, but it is, and it's like it gets stuck between monitors, which is something weird. But anyway, it still works. Alright, so what I want to do is I want to build and run. So I'm going to go build and run, and it's going to ask me where I want it. I want to definitely go into Game 2014 and the Lab 10B, make a new folder called builds, and inside there I'm going to make a Lab 10B APK, which should push everything there. All right. So hopefully you're doing the same thing as me, and it's taking your time. Yeah, it's really weird. When I try, not left to right, Russell, but if I go from top to bottom, if I have 2 monitors, like top and a bottom monitor, and I go from top to bottom, if that's how I've set it up, it's really weird. I get stuck in the middle, which is not normally normal. I don't expect that, but only for that, not for any other application so far. Alright, so it looks like this is working out fine. Let's pull this up in a sec. And you should get this to start. Back to Sunnyland. We start, we have our guy, but guess what happens? So there's a couple things that are weird. Take a look at this. That's not right, right? Look at that. See that? How it's like this part is actually behind the character. That's not cool. The other thing that's not cool is, well, right now the character's camera doesn't move at all, right? Which is a problem, and it's kind of floaty. This floatiness is not cool. So we're gonna fix all this in gameplay fixes. All right, cool. So that at least it works. Yeah, see, it's stuck like halfway through again. Look at that. It's like it's just not liking it. If I do one of these and I pull this in, right? It's like I get stuck at the top there for some reason. Really weird. But that's okay. It's not that important because I'm able to test it, and when it gets tested, it grows to its like, you know, maximum size anyway. All right, so cool. So I've got everything working, but so we removed Cinemachine, we removed the regular camera. Notice that there is no more standard assets, and I want to install Cinemachine for the first time. Let's do that together. So I'm going to go to Window. I'm going to go to General. Sorry, Package Manager. In the Package Manager, what I want to do to install Cinemachine is I want to go to the Unity registry. So if you're not there already, go to Unity registry, scroll down, and there's an entry for Cinemachine. Okay, I'm going to click on Cinemachine and then click on Install. Okay, so this is going to install this new package that we're going to be using today. So please make sure you install this. All right. Looks like we also have an update for our device simulator. Should I? Sure. Let's do it. Let's be brave and crazy and go to 2.24. Why not? Worst case, it breaks and we can download everything again. All right, that's cool. So we got Unity, Cinemachine, and we updated our device simulator. We can close this off now. And we should be able to see in the simulator the same thing we had before. All good. But what we want is we want to apply our new Cinemachine camera in here. And the way to do that, when you install Cinemachine, at the top you have a new menu item called Cinemachine. So click on there and go to Create 2D Camera. Use it for A2. That's awesome. All right, cool. So take a look at that. So VCam1, right? And VCam1 is looking at, it connects to this thing, main camera. What happens with Cinemachine is it adds a Cinemachine brain script to the main camera as soon as you create the 2D camera. Okay, that's what happens. So again, I went to Cinemachine, create 2D camera, and when I did that, it created this virtual cam that actually first it created the Cinemachine brain, and the virtual cam is the active camera now. What we can do is we can point it to an object like the player. So if I drag and drop the player object onto the follow script, this area here, instantly we have a difference. So if I play now, it's just as good as before. In fact, maybe it's even a little better. And let me explain what we can do here to make this better. So I can turn on game window guides. Let's turn on game window guides. Game window guides inside of the window shows us the area where the VCam is on, right? And what we can do is we can do a couple things, right? One of the things that we can do with the VCam is we can adjust the damping. So right now there's damping level is 1. What damping level does is if we turn the damping, let's say to 2 on the x-axis, right, then when we play, you're going to see that the camera follow is a little bit slower, right? See how there's a bit of delay there? So again, if I run, slow, right? So that's what camera damping does. If you want snappy, kind of action, you can turn damping completely off, and you can see now that the camera fully follows the player no matter what they do, right? So you don't normally want this zero damping because it's a little bit too much in terms of what the player can look at, right? So player damping should be set to at least 1, I would say, in that range. You can make it snappier by going down to 0.5, but I wouldn't go down to 0, okay? The other thing is screen X and screen Y. These are the offsets for where the camera is. So if I go something like 0, you can see that it's pointing at the bottom. If I go 1 or somewhere else higher, I can change what the virtual camera is looking at in the X and Y dimension, right? I like to be slightly lower, so I like to make this something like 0.4. Okay, so the camera is actually, I'm always centered on the character, right? Kind of, he's in the middle. All right, and if you don't think 0.4 is okay, 0.45 might be better. You have a bit of that top window coming in there. That's not bad. 4.5 or 0.45 is okay, but 0.5 is maybe a little bit too high, right? To show you the difference. All right, so it's a little bit too much. So your camera, so I see too much of the top part of the screen. All right, that's that. Dead zone. What that is it creates an area for the camera, so when you're running, right, with the character, before the camera moves, it's got to move a certain length. Okay, and almost like a zone. And you can create a minimum width and a height for the camera. And this is really important in terms of the way the camera responds, right? So I think it's a good, safe idea to give a couple of points to the dead zone. So dead zone width would be something like 0.2, and dead zone height would be something like 0.1. And if you notice, it creates this little box here, right? So what happens is the character can move from here to the edge of the box, and only then does the character move, the camera move. So again, if I run it, you can see now that I have a little bit more control. I can move, and then only when the character moves at the outside of that box does the camera move. So for example, here it moves, but inside here, like if I was on a platform or something, it would be really troubling if the camera moved, like minuscule movements when I'm inside the platform like this, right? But I don't want it to be damped so much for the height. Typically what I want to do is, if I jump, I want the camera to move. Okay, I want the camera to move. All right, notice how that box comes into play now. So at the top of the box now is where this thing hangs out, which is pretty cool. All right, there's other options here as well. Soft zone, you know, again, there's stuff that we can adjust, but more or less I've talked about the things that I would do. The other one we want to look at is something called look ahead time. And what look ahead time is, if we increase it, but let's say like 0.3, and we increase the smoothing to at least, let's say 1, then what this does is it removes jitter. What look ahead allows us to do is kind of look over here, right? Ahead of time, before we move, we can kind of create an area where I can kind of look ahead, slightly ahead of where the character's going from a collision detection as well. So I think it makes it a little bit of a better experience to do that, right? So look ahead. Much nicer. And so this is all built in. There's nothing for you to, you know, to do in terms of coding. It's all built in, and it's a great, I think, addition to Unity. We can also adjust later on. We're going to use this for screen shake, which we're going to see later on. Okay, so let's save this. We made the camera move differently. The other thing I want to do with camera, since we're on the camera and movement, is I want to make my movement a little bit more snappy. And what I mean by that is, right now we're sitting and it's kind of floaty, like he floats. I don't like that, right? So one adjustment that I'm going to make, and you feel free to make this or not, is I'm going to change the character's rigid body 2D to 10 scale in terms of gravity scale. So this is going to mess up some of my movement scripts, and I got to talk about this for a second. I want to change my horizontal force and my vertical force to match that, because right now if I move with an added gravity scale, I'm not moving because I'm pinned to the ground. Notice that, like, this is not even good enough to jump anymore, right? I need to force myself up a lot more than this. So let's experiment with some numbers. My thinking is something like 2,000 for horizontal force, so I can kind of move, and that's not even good enough. Let's go 2,500 or 2,600, let's say, something like that. That's pretty good. Notice how I stop on a dime now, right? Because gravity is pulling me down. I'm not sliding as much anymore. If you wanted to slide, you'd want to give your material a change. Maybe add friction, zero friction to the material so that you can slide. Vertical force needs to increase. Let's make this something like, I don't know, 600. Let's see if this makes any sense. Or does it need to be more? Let's make it 1200 or 1300, right? So yeah, that's much better now than before. But even 1300 seems to be just barely enough to do it. Again, I'm just adjusting for what it looks like here. Yeah, and that's pretty good, right? I get snappy kind of response. Now you may not like it. I do. I think it's way better this way than it is from how we had it before. Now this is suffering. Because of that problem, I come on the ramp and I can't do anything. I got to adjust this. So this is something I have to change. So again, 2600 here and we said about 1500 there or 1300. Let's go 1500. Let's try that one more time. Yeah. Right? And again, this is okay. I think this velocity is okay. Maybe even it can use a tweak. Maybe it can even go faster than 2600. Right? Because I think that might be best. Let's try. You might find a good value. Yeah, that's way better. Much smoother than before. Again, you have to adjust it for your gameplay. But I find that that's much better already. All right, we need to make some adjustments. One, I know where I get stuck. I've had some bugs happen over time, and I'm sure you've had too if you've been using this thing. I'm going to go and turn off 3D icons for a second. I'm going to zoom in here and talk about some of the bugs I'm having. So one of the bugs I'm having is when I go up a ramp. When I'm at the top of the ramp, because this is an eye level with the character, the ramp is here as an example. Here, let me draw it out with my annotation. Let's suppose there's a ramp and it comes to this point, but here's where I'm drawing the line. Take a look at this line here. So I'm drawing a line that goes like this. There's another line that goes down here like this. And the ramp stops here. So when I'm at the top of the ramp, it looks like I'm going down now. Because my conditions are, when I enter the ramp, this is my problem. Maybe, as an example, if you use Michael's system or if you use Russ's system, you wouldn't have this problem. But I haven't changed that, right? So if I march along this way, I'm not on the ramp. Actually, I'm going down now, right? If it's like this, right? Because my system is, if I'm on a ramp and I can't see anything in front of me, then it must be going down. That's my assumption. But what about this case? So, to fix that, and we got a couple of problems again, this is gameplay improvements that we talked about before, right? So we want to kind of, fix this up. Okay, so we want to grab this thing and we want to pull it down and back a little bit. Okay, so kind of it sits this way, not on eye level, but rather this way and closer, right? So that the ramp, these two things are on the ramp at the same time. The other thing that I'm having a problem with is when I run this thing, if my character, so I grab my character here for a second, if my character, if he is right here, that's a problem. They're not grounded anymore, right? And I'm not falling. This can't be the case. I can't abide by that. That's a real bug, right? A couple ways to fix this problem would be to use a different type of casting. If I'm going to use, instead of a ray cast or a line cast, I could use something like a sphere cast or a box cast equivalent, which is a volume, right? Or more than one of these little lines that goes in different directions. So I have, if I'm okay here, I'm good. If I'm okay here, I'm good. But, these kind of a few lines here, a few more rays. It's up to you. The other option is to change my collider shape, which is what I'm going to do. So in my collider shape, if I look at my capsule collider, right now my collider kind of looks like this, right? And notice that the point that I'm colliding and the collider itself is got a bit of a problem, right? So, and the top is pretty big, right? So I'm going to bring the top down a lot more. I'm going to leave this part just a touch, so the face is being covered. But the back is something that I want to bring all the way as much in as possible, because I'm not going to get attacked from the back as often, right? Physically. If I get hit by a bullet, it's going to hit a box collider, and I'm going to be okay. But when I'm physically unless I'm being chased, I'm going to let it so that I'm going to say that this is going to be something that looks like this. Now we got to bring it into the point where it's not going to collide, but rather it's going to be here, right? So that's pretty good. I even think we can go further down. I think we can go almost to there, maybe even further. So notice that the offset now is to the front of the face. The back of the body we're not going to actually worry about so much. And again, if you notice, I take the player and I go to the player's handle and I try and put him in the same spot that he was in. For him to be here, right? That's still okay, which means I still need to go further. Like I want to make it so that when he's here, when the character's right here, that he's going to fall. The character's going to fall, right? So again, I'm going to go to the collider and really trim that collider so that it's going to make him fall right away, okay? And we can't do it again because if we fall again, it's going to reset. So we want to capture these values in a second. But I'm putting this out to you because this is a problem for us right now. It's a glitch, and this is one of the things that can help us with better snappy play. Right now, again, there's some of you may complain about this part. I don't care right now as much. Remember that I can use another collider. I'm only using one single collider. Some people use multiple colliders for the body. The head might be one collider. As an example, some people do that. There's another collider for the body or the legs, you know, those kind of things. People do all kinds of funny things. It's really up to you, all right? So this is one of the improvements, and I'm just going to move this guy here again. But before I go to the edge, because this guy's going to fall now, let's copy some of these parameters. So I want to copy them off. So we'll say copy component. You can do that in play. Right, and then as I move things over, when the line just passes by, I should be able to fall, right? So this right there is unacceptable. So again, let's just do it again, and we want to try and even go further in. So from this pixel, maybe to this pixel. So again, I'm going to go to probably about there, which is like 0.1193654. So what happened? Well, he got reset, right? We went back to this scene. Okay, so let's go stop this and go back to the player. And we're going to say that we're going to paste values, right? And we're going to go back and play him one more time in here. And I'm just going to bring him in one more time just to fix that value. It's 11 something is what it was, 11 point something. So just a little bit there. Again, I'm going to try and prevent, my attempt is trying to prevent this from, you know, having the ability for you to be there at all. I'm thinking like right there. 5703. So copy component. And let's bring him in one more time and try it out. I want it to fall when the line that's here in the center is right here. Good. That's good enough for me. All right, so we've copied it. We're going back, and we're going back to capsule and paste it as values, which is pasting these values in. I'm going to save this, and now this should be a little bit better in terms of my gameplay. For some, it'll take care of some of the bugs in my movement, not all of them. Right? Still, that is a bug. I don't like that. I still think there needs to be a better threshold, but now I'm able to go up the ramp for the most part, right? But okay, so that's another issue. So good, but when it comes to going up the ramp, that is an issue. See how he struggles there, right? And let's take a look and see what we see when we're at the player itself. So there's the player, so he's on the ramp. So what happens is the player moves. Right? Player moves up the ramp and he's going down, and what happens is I get to there, I'm not on the ramp anymore, right? See that? So that is where the ramp ends. So when I come to this point right here, I've got to have enough momentum for me to go up the ramp. So if I'm playing with this character controller, that means I've got to pull this back even more. I can't collide. I have to be here and still colliding with the ramp. Okay? That's where I have to be, which means that it's going to be aimed towards the front hand more than anything else. Okay? So what I mean by that is that we need to bring that look ahead point even further back and down here. Okay? Something like that. So now let's see how that looks. So I'm going back to the player object, and we kind of go up here, up here, up here, up here, up here, and now we are okay right till about this point, and then we're off of it. So you can see that whether we're off or on the ramp, that we would have probably enough momentum to climb on the ramp at this point. Okay. However, what happens if I look the other way and I'm over here? That also has to be in play. So I'm going to go down, 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 and yeah, that works okay. Because now you can see that that is still okay as I'm going down the ramp like this. And to show you that, and if I push him, he should fall down the ramp nicely. All right, so let's change that. Let's go back to the player. So this can't be here. Again, it's going to be a line further down over here in front. I didn't capture that, but that's okay. Like I did something like this, right? Which is kind of in line with this one. So imagine the ramp being at this level. Again, I'm using this character controller. It's not maybe something that you would use, right? But the idea is that when I'm on the ramp, I should know that I'm on the ramp the entire time. Notice that I don't need help anymore when I'm going up the ramp, right? Right? I'm pretty good. Otherwise, I got stuck before, right? Like up here. One thing to note also is I want to sometimes increase the speed of my ramp a little bit more, and I can do that in the player controller. So in the player itself, player spawn, let's go and bring up the code for this. Right now, what I'm doing is when I'm on the ramp, I'm multiplying it by 0.5 of the horizontal force. I don't want to hard code anything like this as much as possible. Okay, so what I want to do instead of this is multiply by a ramp scalar, or some kind of ramp threshold or ramp sensitivity, and it's almost like ramp force sensitivity, ramp force factor, something like that. So let's make that up. So I'm going to go up to here under the player abilities, under platform detection, under ramp, I'm going to say a public float, which I'm going to call ramp force factor. Okay, a ramp force factor. And that ramp force factor is what I'm going to be using to replace this and this, right? So let's replace that, ramp force factor. And I'm just going to copy paste in those values. Right? And let's see how that looks. So ramp force factor is going to basically allow me to mix up how much of what the ramp force is. So right now I put it at 0.5. What if I made it 1? How would that work? Would I fly? Would it be like jumping? Yeah, the answer is yeah. It would be like jumping. So let's see what that looks like. So, okay, we're on the ramp, and then okay, we're here, and then I'm on the ramp, and pretty good actually, and much better in terms of flow. And what if I change the scale factor altogether? What if I change the scale factor to 4? What happens there? So I hit the ramp and, well, I jump, right? That's what happens. Look, see, I just jump when I'm on the ramp. Right? We don't want that. So something like 1 to 2 would be okay. Let's see what 2 looks like. So it actually increases my speed when I'm on the ramp. I'm actually going up. So 2 is too much. 1 seems to be good enough. And you can go 0.9 and 0.8 to really control if it's too much. So something between 0.9 and 1 would be okay. Let's go to 0.9 and see what that looks like. Okay. I should be able to make it up the ramp with 0.9 no matter what, no matter how slow I go, right? which is pretty good. All right, so that's 0.9. Okay. And I've got my gameplay improvements, and I got Cinemachine done. Let's put this up on GitHub. So file, save project, and let's stop this, put it up on GitHub. So git add dot, git commit, wow. We'll say added Cinemachine. Git push. Come on. I can type once in a while. Ramp Force. I like it. We should call that. There should be a 90s cartoon that's called Ramp Force. My favorite was G-Force. Battle of the Planets. And that was like not 90s. I think it was 80s. I'm really dating myself. All right. So there we go. So we've got our little character, and he's better control when it comes to gameplay. All right. One other problem we have is the opossum. And I didn't modify this at all, but the opossum is a pretty flat back kind of character. And I don't think that's right. What I want to do with the opossum is bring this collider closer in. So again, make it closer to his back. Flatter. And in this way more. So a little bit smaller, I would say. What I also want to do for the opossum is give him a material. Okay, so I want to make a new physics material, and you'll see what I mean in a second. So I'm going to go to physics material 2D, and I'm going to call this enemy material. The enemy material is going to have a friction of 0 and a bounciness of like 0.5. Okay? So why? Because if I go and put it on the opossum now, on the material, right? So this is the physics material on their collider, on their capsule collider, right? So, and if I was to do that, let's take a look at their motion, right? So again, if I go to the scene, bit of a bounce. I'm okay with that. On the bottom, see, there's a bit of a bounce now on the bottom. That's okay. But what this does is, if I was to grab my character, right, and this is another bug that we had with the character. Again, this is just all kind of additional things. I've got it paused. That's why it's like this. Just going to bring the character in here. And let us bring the character in play again. So we'll unpause it. And you see how it only eats the character once. The opossum should continue eating the character every frame, right? Every time they're touching the character. And why? Because we're using a on collision enter. But what about when you're staying like this? If I'm staying like this, the opossum should eat the character, right? Every frame, or every so often. So this is the challenge we have. And what if the player somehow gets on the opossum's back, right? If the player gets on the opossum's back, let's not let him get hit by those things. We don't want him to stay on the back somehow. We never want him to have this issue where the player is on the opossum's back. Now also, that's why I gave the material for the opossum a 0 friction. So if I ever jump on the opossum, I'm going to slide right off. And also the bouncing, it's going to bounce off the opossum's back, which is what I want. I don't want to stick on there. The other thing that I want to do is a couple things, right? The player now, because we've increased the gravity scale to 10 because of the rigid body, we need to change also. I recommend the collision detection goes from discrete to continuous, just for the player object. So that way we don't fall through things. And it's happened in last session. So a few different changes here that I recommend, just to make it so the gameplay is improved. All right, so kind of cool little yeah, we can't ride the opossum anymore. Opossum's not going to allow us to do it. You slide off the opossum's back, as we said. Okay, so what have we covered? We covered this, and we've covered this. I want to now cover a retro dust trail particle system. How do we do that? And then we'll see if we can take a break after this. All right, so yeah, let's get to it. So in order for me to add a particle system to the player, let's get to the player first. So here's my player. I want to, for this example, what I think I'm going to do is I'm going to put the player towards the ground, right? And this way I can kind of judge where the particle system is going to come off. So when I add a particle system, so if I right click, I'm going to go to Effects, and I want to add a particle system. As soon as I do that, you see the particles are coming out. And when I press play, you can see that that's the case. But there's a couple of problems. Notice the problems that maybe you can see them like I can. I have the particles that are going behind the platforms. The platforms and the character and the particles should be on the same space, the same layer. Okay? There's a couple of ways to fix this problem, right? First, let's look at the particle system itself. So the particle system right now has, well, there's one more thing I got to point out here. If I move the player at all, so let's say I move the player with the particle system, right? So let's just zoom out. Look what happens to the particle system. The particle system kind of moves along with the player. That doesn't look right. The particle system should be left behind the player. So in order for me to do that, I got to change my simulation space from local to world. That's the first change you want to make in your particle system. Local to world. So when I press play, you can see now that I move, but the particles are left behind. The other thing that you want to see is that when it comes to the player themselves, or they use a bunch of ways of a lot of things that are happening in a particle system, and this is why particle systems are so tricky. There's a particle system renderer. So if you look at the renderer, this is where the particle system is going to be rendered. I want my particle system to be retro, which means like little blocks, right? So to do that, I'm going to get rid of my default particle, my material, right? So instead of where it says default particle, let's get rid of that. Click on there, and I want a sprites default right here, all right? What this is going to do is when I draw the particle system, I'm going to see big blocks, and that's not really what I want yet, okay? But notice down in here, there is a thing that's called sorting layer ID. Sorting layer ID. So too on the player themselves, they have, under the sprite renderer, there is a sorting layer. I also have order in layer, but what if I don't know, change the order of the player later? Do I want to really care about the order of the particle system? Because the particle system itself also has an order in layer. I could make it to, right? So example, I could make it to, and it would look okay. It would be the same level as the player, and you can see now that it does what I want it to do. But I don't want this. Just in case, let's put this back to 0 to demonstrate. What if I wanted to move the player to another layer? I don't want to forget that this is the case. It'll cause me to have a bit of a glitch, and I'll have to maintain that. I don't want to make this, it's going to be a maintenance nightmare. So in order for me to do that, I want to change the sorting layer to match the player's sorting layer. So under the player, I want to go to the sprite renderer, and under the sorting layer, I want to go to default and choose add sorting layer. Under here, I can go to sorting layer, press plus, and add a new sorting layer called player. Okay, so again, sorting layer, not layer. Layers are for collision detection and stuff like that, and camera views. Sorting layer is where the order in layer kind of plays. And think about this almost like I want to create a super sorting layer. Like what if I had several items inside the player that had their own layering, right? As opposed to just using the simple layering that's in the player itself. So I can make it player specific or player local layering, which is what I want. Player local layering. Okay, cool. So I do this, and then I got to click on the player, and I got to go to the renderer, and I got to select the sorting layer now is player. Okay. Then I'm going to go to the particle system, which we will name Dust Trail. We'll name it Dust Trail, and we'll scroll down to that area where there's the renderer piece. And in the renderer, I'm also going to choose the same sorting layer. So I'm going to go to sorting layer, ID down here, change that to player. And without making any changes to the order and layer, if I press play, now you'll see the same thing. You'll see that these little boxes come out in front. Again, not really what we're looking for yet. Okay? Not really. This is where, notice I've clicked on dust trail, and notice it comes from the center of the player. But that doesn't make any sense. The dust trail should really come from the player's feet. So I'm putting it towards the feet of the player, right where the platform meets the player. That's where I want the dust trail to come out of. You may adjust this a little bit higher or lower as you see fit. We may do that in a bit. Next, once we've done this, I want to change a couple of items. One of them is the shape. If I go to shape, right now you can see that the gizmo tells us that it's a conical shape, like a sphere, but we're making it a cone in 3D. What it would look like is there's a cone of particles that kind of go out this way. Okay? I don't want that to happen. I want the cone to be a box. So I'm going to go from shape of the particles, I want to go to box. And now when I go back to 3D, again, right, so I go back to 3D, you can see it. It's a box in three-dimensional space. All right, cool. So if that's the case, I want a couple things here. One, the scale of the box. I want the particles to be emitted, right, in a certain spot, right? So first of all, before we continue, are you with me? Have you changed the shape of the box to what it is right now? If you are, then check mark. If you haven't, I know Russ, you're with me, but some of the others are not. All the others are not. Okay, I'm seeing people come in. That's good. That's good. That's good. Thank you. Excellent. Thank you, Matthew. All right, so how do we stop the party? I'll talk. Bear with me, Michael. We'll go through it. So again, notice that this is the case. I want to change the shape. So from a Y perspective, it's either very low or 0. So let me show you. If I go 0, then now it's flat. And what happens is, if I run it, you can see that I get this. But what I get is also this, where I can fill a space with particles. And it's getting closer to what I'm looking for. For example, if I jump, the particle fires or triggers and follows me. But the particle is too big. Let's make it smaller. So this is okay. The shape of the particle, it's a plane right now, okay? But what I want instead is that if I scroll up to where it says dust trail, so the main area for the particles themselves, I want a couple of changes. One is the start size. Right now it starts as 1. Let's make it start at 0.1. And if I just do that, and if I press play, you're going to see that the particle now is very small. And it's not so bad. Right? Much smaller. And this is kind of the retro look I was hoping for in terms of how small it is. Not really what I want, and don't worry about it continuously playing. We'll turn it off in a sec. We're just in this testing phase right now, so bear with it. Okay? Next, the duration of the particle should not be long. It should be like this is the particle system, the particle lifetime, if you will. How long the system will last. So instead of it lasting like 5 seconds, let's make it last like 0.1, something really small. Okay? And furthermore, let's go and change the color over lifetime. So if I click color over lifetime and open this up, you're going to see a white color. What I want is there's two sides. This is the start and this is the end. This is going to blend between the start and the end over lifetime. I want to change the end alpha transparency to 0. So in other words, it's going to start at fully opaque and go to fully transparent before it's done. What does this look like now? If I run it, it looks like this. Right? And if you look at the scene, it starts to fade away. Right? So if I move them, Let me show you what this looks like. Let's move them. So we'll take the player and we'll move them. And that's what happens. It kind of creates that effect and kind of stays on the ground. But I want it to go up this way, right? Because that's what a particle trail kind of does. So in order for me to do that, I'm going to go back to dust trail. And there is velocity over lifetime. Let's add that in too. Velocity over lifetime. Let's open this up. Under velocity over lifetime, we have a linear x, y, and z velocity, right? And what I want to do here is I want to make sure that the space, this is again the simulation space. Simulation space should be world, not local. The linear velocity, let's make it minus 0.2. And let's make the y velocity at 0.2. Minus 0.2 means it'll go behind us. Maybe 0.2 is too aggressive. We might go 0.1. But 0.2 goes up this way, right? So now if you play, you should see that by default the particles kind of go up like this. And they disappear, right? There's not that many of them, so I think we need more of them. Let's do that. So that can be changed by going to, if I scroll up here to emission, let's go from 10 to 100. Okay, so rate over time, 100 under emission. So far I've changed velocity this round and emission. If I change that now, we can see that there's more particles coming out, and it's looking better in terms of what I want, right? Looks like a neater effect, but they last way too long. So we want them to die faster. Die means they actually get removed, you know, from our game world, right? So we have this is really important here. So start lifetime and start speed. So the start lifetime, what we want to do is we want to move that right down to 0.5 from 5. So it's like half a second is how long they'll last, max. So now when we do 0.5, you can see that they start and they disappear, right? When I move, this is what it's going to look like. When I move to the left or the right, here, make it bigger. When I move to the left or the right now, they're going to kind of appear and then disappear. If I jump, you can see that the particles are good, right? If I fall, they're good, right? That's kind of what I'm looking for. Now again, you can adjust these things. You can get a different particle shape. If you like hexagons or whatever, you can totally do that. But what it does is it creates that particle effect that I'm looking for, right, when you're tracking the player. Now, Michael said, how do I, turn off the particles? Because I don't want to see them all the time. You're right. I don't want to see them all the time either. And by default, in order for us to activate the particles, we need to turn off looping, and we want to turn off play on awake. So play on awake has to turn off too. So no looping, no play on awake, right? And when we start now, we're going to notice that there are no particles. It's more for the preview in the editor. I couldn't see anything over the bit, but yeah, okay. But notice now there's nothing. There's no particles at all. We want to turn it on when the character's moving, right? So we've got our particle ready. Let's go over the details of what I've got. Duration 0.1, okay? Start lifetime 0.5. Start speed 5, all right? Start size 0.1. These are the things we've changed. Simulation speed is all the same. Simulation space is world. That's where it should be. Play on awake is off. Looping is off, right? In the emission section, we went from 10 to 100. In the shape, the shape would be a box instead of a cone. And where the scale for the box on the x-axis is 1, but on the y-axis is 0, right? And in the velocity over lifetime, we said negative 0.2, so it falls behind. And a 0.2, which is it goes up, right? That's where the velocity goes, right? Color over lifetime, we've modified it so at the beginning, we start off at white and fully opaque, and at the end, we reduce our opacity or our alpha to 0. So this part right here, our alpha becomes 0. Notice that it's black, right? So it fades away. Then we changed our renderer. We made sure that the material we used was a sprite's default. If I change back to that other one that we had, just to give you a sense of this, so default particle, it doesn't look good, right? So here, I'll play it again with. Let's turn these things on for a second. So looping, and we'll warm it up a little bit, and we'll play on awake. So here, actually, it won't work right now because. Let's turn these on again so you can see the particle, what I'm talking about. So if you turn on that little part, that little one, the other one, right? I find that it's too small. You can definitely make it bigger. Like if you want to try this particle instead, let's say you wanted to make it 0.5 instead, then you can make it so it's like this. But it becomes too wah. I'm not really 100% happy with the particle. That's why I went to squarish. You can change the particle texture to whatever you want. So again, going back, I'm just going to take these values away. This one, play in awake, and go back to particle size of start size of 0.1, and then let's just change that particle back to the sprite's default, which is a square. All right, this is all good. In terms of render alignment, the view is good. I didn't change any of this stuff. Notice that it doesn't cast shadows, but you can turn that on. It doesn't receive shadows, but then again, we don't have lighting in 2D, but we did change the sorting layer to player. Okay, so you guys should be all good now with the particle. However, we want to make it activatable. In order for us to make it activatable, we need to put it in a script somehow. So, let's save it in my player controller. I'm going to go into my player behavior, right? And what I want is inside of my player behavior, I'm going to add another section for the dust trail. So again, it's going to be header dust trail, right? And the dust trail, it needs a couple of things. A public particle system, all right, which we're going to call dust trail. Okay, you need that. What I want to do is, and by the way, let's make it m underscore dust trail for now. And we actually don't need to make this at all public. Let's make it so it's private. Sorry, guys. It should be private. We don't need to see the dust trail connection because we're going to make that connection automatically through here, through start. So we're going to say something like m underscore dust trail is equal to get component in children for the particle system. So it's not regular get component, just a note, it's get component in children. Get component in children is going to find the dust trail. Okay? So are you with me for this one? Again, nothing too crazy, right? We're still drifting okay, right? And we just need a reference to it, the particle system itself. All right, a couple things now, right? We want to play the particle system on movement. So when I'm jumping, I want to play the particle system, right? And when I'm moving, I want to play the particle system, right? So anything like that, I want to play the particle system. So I know I can make a one-liner. I can just say dust trail play, but I don't know if I'm going to need something else later on. So I'm going to make it into a little function, private void. For now, there's not going to be a need, right? But we're going to call it private void play dust trail. Okay? Or we'll just call it create dust trail. How about that? And create dust trail will literally do one thing for now. It'll just say, hey, m underscore dust trail dot play, which plays the particle system. Okay, so we're going to add to this later, but keep in mind that we're making it a function for now. So where do I want it to play it? Anytime we move or jump. So I want to go up here where it says move, and I want it to, if I'm moving right, moving left, I want it to play, but not when idling. So in here is good. So M underscore, or sorry, create dust trail. And I also want to create the dust trail down in here. I don't want to do it in here where I'm idling, all right? But I do want to do it when I'm jumping. So these are the places where I'm going to play. Here, jumping, left, and moving right. Okay, let's see how this looks. So again, I'm going to go back to my little guy, right? And let's see how this looks now. When I run, we should be able to see the dust trail play, right? And it only plays where I am running or jumping. It's a bit truncated, to be honest. And if you like, you can make the oh, see, that's a problem. That's a real problem now, right? That should make me fall this way too. So that's another bug we didn't catch before. But yeah, but that's what's happening right now. And if you're not happy with it, let's say for example, hey, you know what? I want it to last a little bit longer. So if I go to dust trail, you know, the start lifetime is 0.5. What if we made it 1? So instead of, you know, half, let's say it's 1. How does that work? Like, what does that look like? You know, when I'm moving, right? Maybe a little bit too much, but, you know, something like a pretty good amount, right? It really depends on what you want. And if you want more dust than this, so let's say this is not enough dust, as an example. So let's make this back to 0.5. Maybe what we need is more emission. So let's say if I said something like 200. So a much thicker dust trail than what that is, right? So again, you know, you can see that start moving, there's a bit of a dust trail, and maybe that might be a little bit better for me. Again, you have to kind of view it for yourself. What do you think is best for your game? But for me, I think this is pretty good. Okay. Dust trail. All right, save. Let's check it on our project, on our emulator, and see if it works okay, right? Because one thing is to check it locally, another whole thing is to check it while we're doing, you know, on the emulator. Any issues so far with anyone who has? Do we stop it once we play it? It won't stop. It will stop if you give it a lifetime, and as long as you don't leave looping on. If you leave looping on, it'll keep playing forever. But if you turn looping off, like we did, it'll stop. Okay. So again, we want to turn off looping. We want to turn off start on awake, right? We only play it one time. It'll die, and once it dies, we play it again. Okay. That's how it goes. So very simple stuff. One thing I had a question about was, what if I wanted to have a dust trail that reflected the landscape? So I'm in the desert and I want to play a dust trail that's a different color, you know? And if I'm in the ice, I want to play a white dust trail. If I'm in like lava, it's got to be like a red dust trail. But what if I really don't like the dust trail that I have? I agree. I think you should be able to change the dust trail with whatever you want. So again, let's just handle one problem at a time. So here we have a start, and yeah, we're good, right? We're playing. We can still jump, and we can fall and die, and fall and die again. But there we go, right? So we can kind of go up there, and we can do this kind of thing. And the dust trail looks pretty good. And you can even generate a dust trail when you're, you know, kind of in there. Crouching. All right, so that is dust trail, but that's dust trail isn't showing up when I move. Okay, again, you have to turn it on. Take a look at my code online. I think is the best way to do it. Darn it, this thing. So hold on a second here. What is going on with this thing? It's so bizarre. Look at that. That is so weird, man. Wow. input. Okay. I don't want to make a mapping. Yeah. Let me see if I can move this thing right. Yeah, it's right here for some reason. That is so strange. All right, so yeah. So that is the dust trail, but I want to, yeah, that's a good point, Russ. Did you get component in children or not? If you take a look at my code for a second, let's go back to the code. When I connected, I did get component in children. That's the trick, because it's not something that belongs to the player itself. It's in the child. Okay. All right, what if I wanted to change that up? So I wanted to make the color of the dust trail. So this is where, by the way, one thing to note, if you want to do some troubleshooting, Kevin, is bring the dust trail into the public view. And one way to do that is to serialize field. So you can kind of come up here and say serialize field. So even if it's private like this, you can see it. One thing I do care about for sure is does this connect? So if I go back to this and I press play, then in the player object itself, we should see a particle system connected, dust trail, right? The other way to do that is if you right click on the inspector, and if you go to debug, then all the private variables show up too. Okay. So we know we're getting it, and maybe what we want to do is put it back as a public for you. Not for me, but for you. Let us, I'm going to refactor rename this thing to dust trail for a second. So refactor rename, we'll call it dust trail. And instead of serializing it, let's put it as a header. Dust trail. We'll make this particle public, and we'll add in there a color. So public, I want to add a color, right? And I want to call this the dust trail color. Or we just can call it color. Dust trail color. All right, so that's the color. And when we do that, what happens in the inspector, let's see what happens when I go back to the inspector, is you see this, dust trail color, right? So you can choose something that's in here, which is kind of neat. Brings up a little color chooser, color picker. So if I want it to be green, or I want to match this part, so let's say, for example, I really want to match this part, right? So I want my dust trail to look like this, right? The land. Okay. By the way, you can do that in different means. You can do that programmatically as well. But I wanted to do this, let's say, as an example. Then what I can do is, going back to code, I want to say that let's get our particle system here a little bit. So dust trail is the particle system. I want to get component. And in the component, what I want in the particle system is the renderer. Here's the renderer component. I want to access the material, and I want to set the color. I'm changing the shader, which has a name of color property, to the dust trail color, whatever I chose. Okay, this will actually change the shader color of the particle system, and this is why it's good to have a function. Otherwise, I have to change this everywhere. All right, so now if I go back and I run it, then you should see when I move a green color. So it looks like it's truly like the same color as my platform, right? You may not want that. You may choose to make it a little darker than the platform, or whatever, since it's dust. You could also make it so that it is more, kind of grayish green. You can choose whatever, you can experiment with whatever color you want, until, let's make it something like maybe a little darker green. And maybe that's not working for you, and so you don't add that in. You try and make it so it's the right color, right? It'd be more like this, right? Right, it's not bad. So you can modify that, and if let's say you're somewhere like that was really cool, maybe you want to make it blue. You know, so a blue trail. You know, if I wasn't in a blue background, it would be okay. Maybe it would pop, or maybe if I was somewhere in a weird spot, it'd be like a purple trail that you like, or something else. But you can modify that on the fly. I'm going to keep it as the same color as the dust trail. It's getting the particle system. Okay, that's weird. It should turn on. I mean, it does it for me. It should do it for you. All right. So I think this is a great place to stop. I'm going to File, Save, and File, Save Project. And I'm going to put this up on GitHub. This is a great place to take about a 15-20 minute break. And when we come back, we'll do the rest of this stuff. Okay? So we're almost like halfway through. And I know people need breaks. I know I do. And I'll definitely bring the code up in a second. But again, the best thing to do is, Alex, is look online on GitHub, because that has everything. And it will in a second anyway. So git add dot git commit -m, and I'll say added dust trail. Git push. All right, so that did that piece. Do you need me to go back to the code, or are you good, Alex? Because this is it right here. So the only code I have is right here, create dust trail, right? In Unity, yes, you can find it on GitHub. Okay, guys, so let's take a bit short break. Right now we're sitting at 116. We'll take 20, so we'll come back at 136, and we'll continue from there. For those people watching on YouTube, we'll be back in 20 minutes.